But initially, I had someone ask me about B vitamins and also about which ones might trigger diarrhea. Now, that in the oxalate world is a little more complicated than it would be in the regular nutrition world. But I'm going to give everybody both answers because I think they have some benefits to us. So, in the regular world, where people are not worrying about oxalate, there are vitamins, B vitamins, which are more likely to trigger diarrhea than others. Very, very interesting. Mostly dose dependent. But in short, the ones that we need to be paying attention to, most commonly associated with diarrhea, first one in the list is niacin or niacinamide. And apparently high doses of this particular B vitamin are associated with diarrhea, nausea, abdominal cramping, and if you're taking conventional niacin, flushing as well. And the reason this one could drive diarrhea for some people is that niacin increases prostaglandins, which are inflammatory factors in the body, and that can irritate the GI tract, and especially at doses that are higher, so 100 to 500 milligrams a day. So if you are taking smaller, sort of more physiological doses in the range of 10 to 20 milligrams a day, you should not be having those kinds of problems. But it is listed as one of the most likely ones to cause some difficulty. So niacin is at the top of our list. Of B vitamins, the next one on the list that I got was vitamin B5, which is pantothenic acid. And again, it's large doses that can put us at risk of diarrhea. So 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. And those are really big doses. So you're talking about half a gram to a gram of B5 in a day. So why would we be taking big doses like that? Apparently pantothene, which is one of the forms of B5, at high doses is used for lowering lipids. And so this might be something that people would be using if they're trying to naturally handle cholesterol better. But the problem here is you could have increased GI motility and you could have that affecting the stool. Now, our friend vitamin B6 is next on the list that I've got. And in the conventional world, this is considered possible for diarrhea, but uncommon. And the reason it's considered uncommon is that it's more likely when doses exceed 50 to 100 milligrams a day. And in the world that's not dealing with oxalate, those people are not necessarily taking huge doses, and they may not be dealing with the kind of gut compromise that those of us who are dealing with oxalate may be dealing with. So B6 could trigger diarrhea, but again, more likely when doses are exceeding 50 to 100 milligrams a day. And in fact, the people most likely to be taking that big a dose would be people who are likely dealing with oxalate or porphyria, pyroluria. I'm not absolutely sure about porphyria, but for sure if you're dealing with pyrols, you need higher doses of B vitamins, particularly B6 and zinc. So again, lower doses, more in the ranges that I'm comfortable with, like up to 25 milligrams, are usually well tolerated. And of course, in the oxalate world, you start this one really slowly because it could start oxalate dumping, which could be another reason why somebody might get diarrhea. Oxalate dumping is going to mean that the kidneys get stressed. But in fact, the intestines are one of the, I'm going to say, main secondary routes out of the body. So the kidneys may be doing the lion's share of the work, but we are secreting a fair amount of oxalate back into the gut, and oxalate's a gut irritant. And one of the ways the gut could respond to that irritation would be with diarrhea. So I would say that this is one of those ones we're more likely to deal with when we're dealing in the oxalate world. There's other B vitamins where it's rare, but possible. And honestly, I don't think we have to worry that much about. But there is some indication that very high doses of B12 could possibly cause diarrhea, but you'd have to be getting up over 2 milligrams of B12 a day, and that's a really big dose. Even the conventional supplements tend to focus on a milligram of B12, and that's already a very large dose. So taking 2 milligrams of it, pretty sure that 1 milligram of B12 is like 14,000% of your daily requirement or something like that. It's like just huge. But many of us us do a lot better when we're taking a lot of it. P5P versus B6. Conventional B6 and P5P are different only in a phosphorus group. And the challenge with B6 is that we actually use B6 in both forms. So that conventional pyridoxine form, our body uses that. And what they call bioavailable P5P is not actually more bioavailable than the other. We use it in different forms in different places. If I understand this correctly, and I'll have to check to make sure I do not have it backwards, P5P is the form that's going to be used inside the cell. But if you're moving it through the body, we tend to move it as conventional B6. So the body is adding a phosphorus group, taking a phosphorus group away, and it's doing that as it's using the resource. So it's a really intriguing kind of nutrient, because I actually found that if I took plain B6, it really did nothing for me. And I found that if I took P5P, I didn't really notice a lot either. But if I took the two of them together, my system got up and sang and was very happy. So it was like I needed a little bit of both in order to address whatever roadblocks my body was having to deal with. It needed a little bit of both. So I have seen people for whom, the angels sing on P5P. I have seen people for whom the angels sing on conventional pyroxidine. And then there's people like me who need a little bit of both. So I wish we had better understanding of which one's going to work for which thing. But I would really recommend anybody who's been taking one form to also try the other, and then to try them in combination. I think that's a reasonable experiment to find the right combination of support for our own individual metabolism, because there may be certain parts of the metabolism where the process of trying to add the phosphorus group is a problem. There may be other parts of the metabolism where the process of taking off a phosphorus group is a problem. And so if we have a little bit of both forms, then we're kind of compensating for any kind of, I'm going to say, challenge in the background. But given that we're talking about B6 as well, I think that B6, in the grand scheme of things, for those of us who are dealing with oxalate, could be one of the things that triggers diarrhea through the mechanism that I was talking about. Oxalate being secreted into the gut, and then the gut being irritated, and then the gut motility picking up. And that could happen for two reasons. First one is the straight ahead physical irritation. If we secrete oxalate back into the gut and it meets up with a friendly calcium molecule and it binds to it, then we have this very unhappy insoluble oxalate, which has the possibility of causing more of the kinds of physical irritation, because you have this potential for microcrystals in the gut and sort of like mild sandpaper moving along, and that's going to be problematic. But oxalate, I've been deep down the research rabbit holes lately, and oxalate, it turns out, is becoming identified over time by the immune system as a bad guy. So oxalate starts to look, especially in its crystal form, like an invader, like an injury, and so can stimulate the immune system. Then you have mast cells on the inside of the gut that become more likely to degranulate in the presence of oxalate because they're reacting to this invader. And high histamine in the gut is associated with diarrhea. So if the mast cells release histamine, that can also trigger diarrhea. And we have mast cells all through the digestive tract. And interestingly enough, from the first bite of food that you take, your body is releasing histamine to handle the peristaltic wave throughout the length of the gut. And so if we start to rev that up so that we have too much histamine there, it's possible that that can be affecting our motility as well. So we've got kind of a two-pronged thing that can be happening with B6, but it would be related to oxalate as to why you might end up with diarrhea. Good news is that B1, the other big gun for support to oxalate, and well, I would count B2 now with what I know, those two are not likely to trigger diarrhea. If you've got diarrhea with those two, for sure back off on the dose. Your body seems to be treating it like it's physiologically too big a dose. And B1 is important for energy metabolism, so we do want to have enough of it. We just want to be getting it, I'm going to say, the right dose for us. And that can be be a tough call as to what's the perfect right dose for us. And that's why I always say start slow with small doses and work up slowly. B2, it turns out, is one of our friends in terms of histamine. It helps in a number of different ways to support histamine management in the body. And it also tends to be very gentle, and it's relaxing in terms of its effect on the nervous system. So we have some really good benefits there, and it does not tend to drive gut issues. And our last big gun for oxalate of the B vitamins is biotin. And oh lordy, biotin can be anything from the angels sing to what have I done to myself? So it could be anywhere in between. So biotin is one of those ones where it's actually having effect on the microbiome. And because our microbiome will have essentially adjusted itself to the kind of fuel that's coming in, and oxalate is a fuel. So we think of it as a toxin because for the human body, it is absolutely a toxin. But our gut microbiome thinks of oxalate as a potential resource. So there are bacteria there that can use oxalate as fuel, as resources. So the challenge for us is when we have been eating a higher oxalate diet for a long time, we have without question shifted the microbiome. That microbiome is tuned to the kind of fuel that's coming in, and it's really organized itself even to some degree to consider the presence of oxalate as part of the mix. So if we start on biotin, and biotin affects the microbiome directly, all kinds of things can start. And biotin is very important to certain biotin-dependent enzymes that our immune system uses to talk to the microbiome. So over time, with a high oxalate diet, those biotin-dependent enzymes are being directly interfered with by oxalate. And this is approximately equivalent to somebody taking the radio and turning down the sound. So the microbiome is there going, pardon? Like it can't really hear the immune system essentially, because those biotin-dependent enzymes are part of how our immune system talks to it. So then it's running its own show. So instead of being properly integrated to the human body so that we're really operating very symbiotically, it's running its own show. And it goes, okay, well, I've been left in control of the hen house, so to speak. What am I doing here? Oh, look at all that oxalate. Okay, so I need more of you guys and you guys because we've got all this resource. And we're not getting as much of other kinds of resources, so we better use this thing. So that can really start to change the balance in the gut. So then we send in biotin, and the body starts making all these biotin-dependent enzymes again, and the radio volume is suddenly turned up, and the gut's just not quite ready to do a complete revamp the moment you start doing this. So if we ease in slowly so that we can start to have the conversation again and turn up that volume, but do it nice and slowly, then what we get is a slow shift in the microbiome, because we don't want to shift that thing too fast. Point of fact, if we've been eating a high oxalate diet for some time, if we start shifting that microbiome too fast and then all of a sudden we go through the next dump and a whole bunch of oxalates available, then we have all kinds of irritation going on in the gut and not enough of the folks who might be able to use it as a secondary backup fuel. So we want to kind of keep that in mind, and we want to allow our physiology enough time to adapt. So if our physiology, if the gut's kind of pointed this way, we don't want to take 24 hours and do this. That's not good for it. We want to swing it nicely and slowly so it's adapting. Everybody's okay. They're figuring it out at each step, and then we end up over here. So most of these things, we have to keep in mind that our physiology has adapted to lack of nutrient, to too much oxalate, to high stress, because chronic oxalate is a chronic stressor. So our physiology is adapted to a whole bunch of things, and we want to move it away from that, but we can't do it so quickly that we essentially knock our own selves off our feet because we don't have the bandwidth to handle what we're doing. So that's kind of a short talk through on some of the things in terms of B vitamins and how they could be affecting the gut, and the possible issue that could result from that being higher histamine, diarrhea, and like the impact of really high doses. All of these things are things we have to think about.